Hello and welcome to Eat Sleep Code, the official Telerik podcast. I'm your host, Ed Charbeneau, and with me today is Jonathan Danylko, or JD for short. How you doing, Jonathan?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it. This is kind of a first for me, so little new to it.
Well, this should be fun. One of the reasons I invited you here is because you have a fantastic blog at Danylko Web. We'll put some links to that in the show notes and share that with folks in chat here. But it's a great blog. You always have fantastic stuff on there. A lot of it's written yourself and from some guests as well. So I said, hey, come on the show. Let's talk about some stuff.
All right. Yeah. Some of the stuff that it's hard to come up with because as you go through your career for so long, you just some of these things you take for granted and you just don't know about it. But then somebody brings it up and asks you a question and you go, that would be a great post. I think I might do that. So.
Absolutely. So before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and what you do?
All right. As Ed said, I am Jonathan Danylko, JD. I work for a company called Insight as a principal software engineer. Love it. Been doing web development since about 94 in my first career, first position way back when. And classic ASP for those who know about it, for the seasoned people. And since then, I've been doing .NET. So, and then started getting into .NET Core, playing around with that some more. And as I learn, I like my audience to learn as well. So I kind of, as I pick something up in ASP.NET Core, I also write about it on the blog. So everything's been going good, but I have some family hiccups. So I haven't been writing too much lately on the blog, but I want to get back into it.
Yeah, those family hiccups can catch you by surprise, and
yeah,
I always use it. It's like kind of an excuse. I'm really bad at blogging, so I can tell you're the opposite of me. You've got the kind of the cadence where you've got posts coming out all the time, and it looks like even though you've hit a hiccup with some family stuff, you'll probably get back into it really good. That's one habit I just haven't been able to form yet, is I don't write enough. So I admire your enthusiasm here.
Well, thank you. Most of the posts, I know I said to you at one point, you asked me how many posts do you write? And I said, well, usually I try and get like 2 a week in, and you're just like, holy smokes, 2 a week. Yeah. He goes, I think Ed was like, yeah, I'm trying to just scrounge for 1 a month. It's like,
yeah. But I know it's a bad habit of mine. My website is pretty sparse these days, but I feel like I'll get back into it here pretty soon. But
you're doing a lot of conferences too. You're doing
a
lot of stuff like that. So that kind of takes up some time. So.
Yeah, it was nice. It was nice seeing you though again at Stir Trek. So we both bumped into each other up in Ohio and Columbus. It was a fantastic time. Did you see anything in Stir Trek that you really enjoyed?
Most of the Stir Trek, I just seeing everybody again, just getting out and making sure that everybody was okay. Of course, some of the let's see, what was the one? Of course, had to make a call out to our own Matt Bolin from Insight. He did a really good presentation on stop deploying at like 6 a.m. and get a good night's sleep. It's kind of like a CICD. So that was a good presentation. We also I saw Steve Smith. Of course, I got to see Steve. What was the other one?
Steve's fantastic.
Yes, he is. Some other ones I think was Joe Guadagno. Six or so new features for .NET 6.
Yeah, Joe's a friend of ours. He works over at Rocket Mortgage.
Rocket Mortgage,
yeah. I think it is. Hope I got that right.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, there were some really good ones. The Secret to Fast Performance. I am starting to get more into performance with .NET than anything. And what was the one I thought? Mike Harrington. It was The Secret to Fast Performance, I think it was, and that kind of it was more. I don't think it was .NET specific, but it kind of led me astray. So I was like, okay, not that one. Um, uh, but yeah, it's Star Trek. They do an awesome job every year. Every year they do one, and
Yeah.
it's one of those. Code Mash and Star Trek are the ones I always try to go to. So
Yeah, folks don't know what we're talking about. Star Trek is one of my favorite conferences. I've mentioned on the show probably too many times, but I'll do it again. Um, it is a conference where inside of a movie theater, they host a day of sessions, and then there's probably 6 or 7 sessions. I think it's maybe 6, and then you get to watch the latest movie release, which has been for the past, I don't know, 8 years, I think, like Marvel. I think it was 1 year, it was a Star Trek movie, which gave it the name. And then the following many years, it's been Marvel, just because that's lined up very well. There's not a new Star Trek movie every year, but there's been kind of a new Marvel movie every year.
Marvel every year. Yep. Yes, there has. Jeez.
Now there's one like every month, it seems.
Yeah. Well, and the TV series coming out. Anybody who knows
Yeah.
me, they know I'm a Marvel junkie. So it's like, yeah, I always look at this stuff and enjoy it. So
Yeah, so it's been kind of a I don't know, a staple of mine, so to say, to go to Star Trek every year. And luckily I've been able to present many times. And you mentioned Steve Smith. He goes by R. Dallas because it's kind of hard to
that's
make,
true. Yeah.
you know, to make your name SEO friendly when it's literally Steve Smith. Poor Steve. So he goes by R. Dallas online, but he's presented, I think, like every Star Trek but one or something. It's pretty insane.
Yep. Yeah, he's been a staple at Code Mash and Star Trek. So yeah, he's always. I think he's one of the organizers. I think. So he can,
I think
get
he
his
has
name
been
in there. I think he can get his name in there to present every once in a while. So
yeah, but he totally deserves it. Like he comes
does.
up, he has such fabulous content. No matter where you're seeing his content, like if it's his blog, it's his Twitch and podcast, and you name it. He's got fantastic stuff. Pluralsight, I think.
Yeah, you want to talk about a guy who's busy?
Oh my gosh,
he is busy. So
yeah, great personality too. Like he's so nice and one of the nicest folks. And then I talked to you at Star Trek and said, "Are you still blogging?" And you said, "Yes, of course." And you have all these fabulous posts on your blog, so I figured we'd talk a little bit about some of the stuff you've been writing about. You've got some posts about testing, unit testing, and a bit about refactoring on there. So those two things are like peanut butter and jelly. Figured we'd chat a little bit about those things.
okay.
So what is the fascination with unit testing? What kind of advice do you have for us?
I'm sorry, I just got a notification and I didn't hear you. What was the fascination with?
Yeah, it's just kind of what's your spin on unit testing? Is it something that you rely on very heavily at work? What's what do you enjoy about it?
Well, one of the things this is actually a little side note, but at one of the companies that I worked for, there was a business rules engine that we had, and at one point we realized there was a major flaw in it. We had some issues that we needed to fix. So we had a whole suite of tests that we set up, our development team. And I think it was, I think about 800, 900 unit tests for this business rules engine. And at one point we found a major flaw, a major problem, which could cause some issues with the business logic.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I said, okay, now that we have the unit tests in place, we can refactor confidently. Okay. So this was more, um, I think I was one of two people who were going through and rewrote the entire business rules engine in 3 days. So this was kind of, as we kept rewriting it, we kept going through and running the unit tests. And the unit tests at the very end of the 3 days, when we were done, everything worked out perfectly, except for one unit test that said you had the name wrong out of those 800. So it's like, we knew what needed to be changed, but changing the core of the system required the unit tests. So that's kind of why I think a lot of other developers, seasoned developers, use this kind of mentality. And I have this on my website under about, I think. I believe that you just get it functional. It could look as messy as this is your first draft. But once you get it functional, then you write a unit test. Then when you create that unit test, then you have something to go back to and refactor. Once you refactor that code, that's when you start making it pretty. When you have the unit test in place. So some new developers don't catch some of that, but it's like just create it. It's a phased approach, of course. Everybody does development in their own way, but that was a side story. But now with that side story, this gets me to the
this is good. I like the lead in here.
One of the posts that I wrote called "What Unit Tests Reveal About a Web App." So some of the, and this was another story, some of the unit tests that I have seen aren't small, but if there's something like maybe for each method you had 20 or 30 methods in your what I call the AAA approach, and I know a lot of other developers have taken this approach as well.
You're talking about range, act, assert.
Yep, exactly. Arrange, which is set up the classes to test, and then you have your act, perform the actual test, and then the assert, which is based on the results. Did it perform the way you expected? So I've seen some arranges where it'll have like 20 or 30 lines of code, which just to arrange it. That kind of, I know I said to you before, and I started getting a little bit of a twitch, when I see this. But I saw that, and that's almost something you need to take a step back and reevaluate a little further. When you have to create so much cruft just to get one line or two lines working, and then you would do an assert, something is amiss. Something is off. So
it sounds like whatever you're testing, you have to be able to reason about it while you're using it in production. And if you've got 20 lines of setup for that thing to be tested, then there's a lot of like state going on. Yes. It's possible whatever you're testing has more than one responsibility. I'm going on a limb here, but I'm pretty sure that's certain.
No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So what other code smells can you think of there?
Hate to bring this one up, but I've seen some code where somebody created a unit test library to test the code so their unit test would pass. So that's kind of like the second point that I had here for writing code for your unit tests so your unit tests pass. And what I mean by that is some people would create so much extra unit testing helper functions just to make their own code run. And then in their unit test, they would call that unit test library just to get the single value back asserted properly. So it's kind of so do you make unit tests for your unit test library that you just created?
Yeah. So if you got a factory that's spinning up stuff just to make your thing testable, then that might be a problem.
Yeah, and that's that I have seen one, two, probably three places that have done that. But the code, I as an experienced developer, when you actually look at some of this code, sometimes you have to take a step back and go, okay, what are we trying to do? And when I saw core library functions with a unit testing library or layer on top of that, it kind of made me think, okay, well, shouldn't that unit test, all that cruft that's done ahead of time, shouldn't that be put into an abstraction in your core library just to get things up and running, maybe a service layer of some kind of melted in, you know what I mean? Um, it would be more of, it should be 1, 2, maybe 3 lines of code for a range, and then an assert to kick it off. And your assert should look almost like production code. It should look like a production call inside your core library.
Mm-hmm.
So
everything we've kind of mentioned here so far has been pretty language agnostic.
Yes.
But I'm going to mention something that's very, very .NET like. I'm sure there's similar things in other languages too. But do you use fluent assertions at all?
Yes, I do. I need to put
That's
more.
something I really like.
Yeah, fluent assertions. I like those as well. Those and um, I've I think all I have is like a Rhino, or not Rhino Mox, Mock. I use MOQ
Mm-hmm.
Mock for most of my stuff, but the fluent assertions, I haven't blogged too much about that. Thank you. I might not need to write that one down for a blog post. So
That is one thing that has made my testing, uh, you know, the code much more readable and easy to use. So fluent assertions
yeah,
is an extension method library that is for testing that gets you away from writing assert A is B. Instead, it extends the type. So it's already contextually aware of the type. So say the method you run produces an integer. When you hit, the dot after that method, you're going to get the result. So the result is an integer already. You're going to get only extension methods that apply to integers. And, this goes for whatever the return type is. So if it's a string, you'll get string matching assertions. Very simplest example of it. If, something returns a Boolean value, let's say, when you type dot, you'll get, IntelliSense for is true or is false, instead of having to type in assert, so-and-so method, comma, false. That whole thing, just, it reads better with fluent assertion. I love that library. It's one of my absolute favorites.
Yeah, it's what I call programming. Yeah, I can't speak today. Programmatic syntax. It's like programmatic sentences. It just automatically flows. It's like you're talking. So it's kind of
makes it human readable. It doesn't look like
exactly.
You're writing it for a computer, but you're writing it to speak it out loud.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the way a lot of my code actually, I try to write it so it can be spoken. That's kind of like where my mind goes.
Same here. Here. I always try and do, Hungarian notation was way back when, and that was like putting the type in front of the name of what it was called, like I number. That's kind of ridiculous, but it would be an integer. So
yeah. So we've got the arrange, act, assert. Kind of keep your tests minimal. What do you do with stuff that's just really, really hard to test?
Yes, this is where you get into some of the refactoring, like we mentioned before. Some of the hard to test, and I believe some developers go to this place when this happens, because again, unit tests are first drafts, kind of making sure everything runs fine, but then you should look at those unit tests and go, wow, that is way too big to put in a unit test, and maybe take some of those methods or some of those classes and make a service class out of it of some kind with
Hmm.
those same layers, I guess, with those same methods, and then just call that one service to do all of that. I mean, I know it's different. I'm contradicting myself almost. It's almost like it's you're performing more setup in the core application than you are for your unit tests. Does that make sense? Because
Yeah, I think what
yeah,
you're saying is like don't write like a factory method for the test library. Write the factory method so it can be used in your application when it needs it.
correct,
Yeah.
correct. So it when you have when you have these large methods or these large unit tests, that's the time to take a step back and look at the forest through the trees kind of thing. Is this where this should be? And it may be time to analyze the architecture of the application, maybe, because the
Hmm.
web app, it may be doing, it may be time to refactor some things, is what I'm getting at. So um, the refactoring, um, when you refactor your code, it makes things so much easier to unit test, because the smaller the method, the easier it is to unit test.
Hmm.
So
And when when you have these unit tests written, then you can refactor with certainty that the things you're rewriting aren't going to break. That's
yes,
where I think the real value of the unit tests shines.
absolutely, absolutely. And it just seems, like I said, when I rewrote that business rules engine, and I had help. Trust me, I had a lot of help from some other people. Um, it got to the point where we relied on those unit tests to make sure that everything was working as planned. And except for that one unit test, 800 unit tests, only one of them broke. And it was because of a name or something. So that kind of
Hmm.
gave the developers more peace of mind that, yes, we did this the right way going forward. So, and it was definitely better code. So definitely.
I've been speaking to a friend of mine named Eagle Hansen. He's the creator of B Unit for
Oh,
Blazor for testing Blazor components, and I've done some unit testing and I feel like I'm pretty decent at it. And then you talk to somebody like Eagle and you're like, wow, this guy really knows how to do his stuff.
you feel about this
Uh,
big, don't you?
yeah, this guy's got unit testing down to an art form.
Yeah.
So he's made a nice library for testing Blazor components, and you start writing tests against your components, and you start realizing where um, you know s- smaller components need to be taken out of those things and made into individual components, and it's really eye opening. And then you can go back and refactor and break things, but break it with
Oh yeah.
the reassurance that you can fix it and know it's fixed. And I think that's a game changer. It's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing. And the people who write these tools, it just blows my mind. Just
Hmm.
how much they know. Because like I don't even, I mean, I just feel about that big when I start talking to some of these people about some of the unit tests. But it's I try and humble myself and just and learn. So it's like I'm still learning.
So let's talk a little bit about refactoring. Like, what are some of the either like what are some good examples of things you've worked on? You've got some like a series of blog posts around that, and what are some of your favorite, stories from the front lines on this type of thing?
Oh my God! Back in my day when I used, oh no, I'm not going to do that. Um, one of the refactorings. I have a blog post. I do a lot of collections on my website, and one of them is a collection of real world refactoring. And this is
Hmm.
some of the things that I've gone through with development. And one of them was uh, the Reese's Cup development problem. Um, what happened was some people, if you remember back to the web forms days, I don't know if you remember registering JavaScript on the C# side to send it over to the client in web forms.
Yeah, unfortunately, I do.
Just me mentioning that, I feel dirty. I'll be right back. I gotta go take no. It some of the that's what I call the Reese's cup problem. You got your C# or your JavaScript in my C#, and you know some of the stuff I've been doing was I think it was even having HTML and JavaScript back in the days, but now it almost seems like it's turning into commonplace to have some of the HTML with the JavaScript with some of the React and just mixing everything together and moving it along. It was just with the having the HTML in the C# just did not feel right. Just streaming that back instead of calling a web control and then just having, passing in a variable for that and passing that along, and it felt some of the things that we needed to do was make it more declarative instead of programmatic. So if you had a declarative file, you could put in the templating in the ASCX and then just call that to pass that back instead of hard coding the HTML and then spitting that back. So it's kind of
so it's a little bit different than what we do with React and Blazor, because in React and Blazor, there's like an engine behind, there's either a view engine behind it, or there's some sort of tooling, like a preprocessor, like React gets kind of like compiled, for lack of a better term. In this scenario, we're talking about like shipping raw HTML with embedded logic that tells the browser how to then interpret said HTML that we just delivered. And that is a messy situation to get into. It's really hard to test, for one. For two, like if something breaks, you're really hard to like troubleshoot that thing.
Yeah, it is. And then what was one of the other ones? One of the items that I was looking at, I think some people who know me, they know when they show me a switch statement, I kind of get a twitch as well.
I can agree with this one.
The reason I kind of get a twitch is because of, instead of just doing almost like the if then else, if then else, if then else, if then else, like the arrow, I think it was, what is it called? The arrow if then else?
Expression bodied.
It's like an arrow. You just get the long if then else. It just keeps going zigzagging. Instead of doing that, this could actually be a class of some kind. And one of the in one of the posts that I had, it was talking about planets, and it was an enum, and each planet had Mercury, Venus, all the planets. And then for a planet decision, it determined what was the distance from the sun, and it had, if it's planet's Mercury, make it this number. If it's Venus, make it this number. Just all of these different distances from the sun. It would have been easier just to do a class and then inherit from that, compose it that way with an interface. Just say, what's the distance from the sun? And then you could just return back, this is the distance from the sun,
Yeah. So
that kind of thing.
Anytime I see enums, that alone is like, they should be they have their place, right? They do have their place, but they need to be very well thought out before you commit to them. It should not be one of the first things you reach for. Should be maybe the last thing you refactor. It should be refactored out from something else where you're like, oh, this could have been an enum. It would have made life easier, not the other way around, because
Yeah.
once an enum's in your code, then it's hard to get rid of it.
The enums also, I think I remember if you look up enumeration classes, I think Jimmy Bogard talked about it, and funny enough, so did Steve.
mhm,
And it was more of enumerations were an automatic smell altogether.
yeah,
And I think they created like a base enumeration class of some kind where you can inherit from it, and then uh, even inherit from it further, extend it out further if you wanted, like person, employee, manager kind of deal with the hierarchy. And then you can apply certain properties to it if you just wanted it kind of like a lookup.
yeah.
So
A lot of times the enums like should really just be used for things that have a finite set of switches, and you do
yes,
not plan on those things ever really being expanded on. It's not something that's going to be dynamic in any way, and you really just want to limit your API to these certain things, these certain options or something. But other than that, they can cause a lot of unwanted side effects. And as soon as you write one, the first thing that's going to happen is somebody's going to be like, I need to add a thing to this list of enums. And you're like, uh-oh.
yeah. And that's why they were talking about the enumeration classes. It's like all you do is add one onto it. You can inherit from it or add another. Yeah. So,
Yeah. In the example that you give, this is actually very similar. I wonder when you wrote this, because we may have written
long
something
2015. Oh, yeah, yeah.
2015. We were probably writing about the same time, this whole coding exercise. It's very similar to something I have in a workshop that I gave. Actually, I think you might have been in that workshop at one
I
point
was in the
too.
workshop. Was it the poker?
Yeah.
The card?
So
Yeah.
we come up with
Yeah.
very similar solutions on this. So it's in a poker game, I did this, and instead of switching through all these different outputs and deciding on what the top uh, the score of the poker hand is, if you put them in objects, then they can go inside of a list, and if they're inside of a list, you can use link to sort them. And that's kind of what you've got going on
Exactly.
here. Is you have a list of planets and their distance from the sun, rather than this chain of if then else or switches
Yeah.
that so you can use you've got this dot find in there, which is a link method, if I remember correctly. Or is that just one of the native list functions? I can't
I
remember.
think that's one of the list.
Is that
I
Yeah.
think. Oh, now you got me thinking.
I know I can never remember which ones are extension methods and which ones are built in.
Yeah.
Like add is definitely a built-in thing. I think find is built in also.
I think find is built
It's
in.
either part of list or I collection or something like that. But anyway, it's
Yeah.
still a list-based function at the end of the day. But yeah, it's a lot easier to use that than it is to manually like code through all the iterations and have set outcomes for each thing.
Yes,
So definitely
exactly.
like that one. That's a
And
good
then
example.
another one that I like is um, was the filtering products using a builder pattern. The builder pattern that's kind of goes along the lines of what we were talking about earlier with the fluent assertions.
Hmm.
Um, if you wanted to create, like, let's say you had say you were building uh, instead of new egg, it's called new ed, or something like. But you had a list of all these products, all these hardware products, and you wanted to filter on memory, RAM, all these different properties of these hardware components. Uh, you can actually create a use a builder pattern to filter out some of these items. And
Hmm.
this is a shout out to you when
Oh,
I
thank you.
first started doing this. You had a library. I think it was a predicate builder,
Yeah,
I think, of
it's
some kind.
still out there, and it's .NET standard compatible, so it's pretty much like it's going to live forever. I'm going to knock on wood for that one, but it shouldn't
So,
need any updating. Just to, you know,
not yet,
that's my
anyway.
favorite. That's my favorite kind of open source project because I can write it once and like never have to touch it again. I've
There
got
you
two
go.
of those that are very agnostic to .NET versioning and things. Anyway,
Yes, and this was something that I absolutely was trying to figure out how to do, and you actually had the solution for it with your predicates. So as you're going through, you have a product, and then you add on to the predicate to get it from the catalog in the table. You say and
mhm.
also equals 1 meg, or this or that. It, and as you keep clicking things on the left hand side for memory, or it has to be within a certain price range, or all this, when you click the filter button, all of those get sent back, and that builder pattern creates this result set back for you. And that was kind of the engine of a search function on a commerce site that I did. So that was, I mean, I know some people, some developers would go, if this is this, then add that to that. Again, once you get that rough draft, then you kind of go back and you go, that just doesn't look right. just
Yeah.
something needs fixed. So, but
With these expressions that you get in like filtering and sorting, this went back to an article I read. I'm trying to remember where I read it, and I think it was a very generic thing. It wasn't based on .NET. It was just a general computing thing, and it was a filter and pipeline programming model. And the idea is, with a filter and pipeline is, say you have a reservoir of foo and you have to
yeah,
get it to the spigot, whatever that is.
yeah,
You probably want to run a series of filters on it before, it gets to whatever the consumer is. So instead of having inline like all of these search criteria with, sorts and finds and this and that, you just encapsulate those in a method. And extension methods work really great for this. Regular methods can do it too, but you basically componentize the search criteria. So it's, for each
yes,
property that you need to search on, you might have this is, people older than 50 filter. And
yes,
inside of that method what it's going to do. It's going to search for whatever records where the person's age is above 50, for
exactly.
example.
And I
And
think you actually wrote a post about this, about making things so much easier to read. Again, the
mhm.
programmatic sentences. So you could actually, it's readable. So and this was part of, yeah, if it's greater than 50, then it would return this, less than 50 or greater than 50, and then return back that lambda. So it's, yeah,
Yeah.
I remember you
Yeah.
writing that.
I think I use this on I could talk about some of these things now because I don't work for that company anymore and I know the software is like obsolete.
Okay.
I built a what's called an MSDS database. So this is something we could have bought off the shelf for many hundreds of thousands of dollars a year or whatever it was, or we could have built it ourselves. And it's really just a simple document repository for materials at a factory.
Yeah.
So basically, what they would do is they would say you buy some epoxy. That
Mhm.
epoxy comes with a material data safety data sheet, and it says, is it flammable? Is there a procedure if you get it in your eyes?
Yeah.
It's all the safety information, and a lot of it is just property based stuff, and it's all standardized. I loved working with anything that had a JDEC standard or an industry standard behind it because that means there usually was like a property definition or a schema of whatever this thing was. I just needed to take their standard and turn it into code. So this one was all the material safety stuff. You ever seen that diamond shaped thing on the back of a truck going down the road? Where it has like, it's flammable, and then there's like some other numbers that if you're not in any kind of industrial, factory or anything, you don't know what those numbers mean. But to somebody that works in safety, that if the truck gets in an accident or something, those numbers can mean life and death. That's what this was about. So it's like they would take the diamond and key in the few numbers that were there. Even though this thing was standardized, it never came with like a bit of like data or an API. It was always like a hard copy of some manual or whatever. So they'd queue in, the pertinent properties to it, then scan the document in and attach it to the properties. And then they would want to search on, what in the factory is flammable. They could just, click on, a thing in the UI, and it would queue up the is flammable sort criteria and sort all the items that way. So I had all these filters built in that they could just go in and ad hoc query on stuff. And then those things would turn into SQL queries through Entity Framework without any other intervention on my part. So
perfect.
It was a really easy database to write, but the CAN solutions were like astronomical in value. Like there was so many people just selling these solutions, and I was able to like make that in a couple weeks and just deploy it. It was really easy stuff.
Well, that's cool,
relatively speaking. So that's where the idea for that came about, and then it looks like you ended up using it for something very similar too.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. That was good library. I like it.
Yeah. That's cool to see it actually get used for something other than what I was doing. But it's a very similar, scenario. It's like if you break down the problems to their fundamentals, it's like we have a thing, we need to search and filter it. It's not a new problem.
Exactly. Somebody has encountered this somewhere out there.
Yeah.
So, and that's why I love some of these refactoring books, and I just can't say enough about them. I mean, the one book I have somewhere, it's called Refactoring into Patterns. Mm-hmm. And it's if design patterns in C# and the refactoring book by Martin Fowler had a kid refactoring into patterns. That's probably the best way to describe it. And it was almost based on the builder pattern, which is that filtering products using a builder pattern. Once I found that inside that refactoring into patterns book, I was like, the light came on, and I was like, oh wow. And I started flipping through trying to find more, what other kind of patterns are in here, what else can we make? So it's amazing, some of those books that have so much knowledge. That's why I love the Signature series.
Yeah, so. You mentioned a name earlier that got me looking at the types of code we're talking about more in depth, and that's Jimmy Bogart. I remember he did this. So Jimmy, if you don't know who he is, again, we're dropping over to like the .NET side of things. He's been influential in the .NET stuff for quite a while. So he is brilliant at finding these abstractions that come off of, I have this app at work, that I wrote, but I know somebody's, a million times over solved this problem. Why is there not a library? Mediator's one of them. The other one is AutoMapper. Like that was, or is still, yes. I'm sure, very popular. It's like,
that's I need a signature. Yeah.
Need to map these things together. But before I even knew about AutoMapper, he had a talk that he gave, and it was recorded somewhere, It may have been a Code Stock or Code Mash or whatever, but it got recorded, thrown on YouTube. And I remember seeing this talk he gave called "Putting Your Controllers on a Diet," and
I think I
he
remember that one too.
he refactored the snot out of these controllers in an MVC application to where the controllers were basically like 2 lines of code. And there was, I think, AutoMapper might have been in there, and a couple other simple like messenger patterns that he had just thrown together.
I think I
And
remember that.
I was like, I had looked at something I was working on, and there's like 60, 80, 100 lines of code in the controller on a given controller, and I'm just like, yeah, this is not good.
I can see Ed looking at this going, no.
Like 2 lines of code, 200 lines of code. Like, I'm not good at this. You know what I mean? It's like, it kind of feels like I used to play a lot of like arcade games back in the day, and I used to go to this. We had this bowling. Like, it's time for an old man story, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we had a bowling alley near my house in Tampa that was the biggest arcade in probably South Florida, if not further. Okay. And everybody that was into video games would go there to play. They literally had 3 different rooms. It was basically the entire length of the bowling alley from one end to the other was arcade machines. 3 rooms. 1 room was all fighting games. So, picture back in the day, like this is early 90s, of a room that could hold, I think they had 8 Mortal Kombat 2 machines. It was like the Noah's Ark of fighting games. They had at least 2 of everything. At the very least, there was 2, of the least favorite games. So there was like 2 Virtual Fighter 3s or whatever it was. They had 4 Killer Instinct machines, which was my jam. And at first I was really bad at it, and people would kick me around. And then after I spent a good amount of time and money there was a queue behind me that would last all night. And I would just go in with 50 cents, and I'd sit there for like 3 hours straight, just dropping people. And then, this game comes out, probably 20 years later on the Xbox, and now it's online. That's a whole different ballpark of competitiveness. Like, you're talking about like the greater Tampa area, and then now you're talking about the entire world. Yes. And that was kind of like the same feeling. I'm like, I'm looking at my code and I'm looking at Jimmy Bogart's code to bring it back to point. And it's like, yeah, like,
thanks,
this is a different league. I'm in a different league here. Like, so
well, I did put that in. I have like this is an old post, really old. This was like 2004, 2006, 2004, 6, 5, 6. Top 20 lessons learned in 20 years of programming. And it was just like 20 things I've learned. And one of them was, just remember, there's always somebody better than you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, that's why you learn. This is like, you don't stop learning when you're out of high school or college. I am still learning. And I'm not going to say my age, but I'm older. So yes, I am still learning. So it's a whole journey here.
Myself plenty with the Killer Instinct happening championship.
There you go.
Champion of Tampa, which there wasn't a competition, but if there was, I would have joined it. It was pretty darn good. But again, like, once you travel outside that little fishbowl, and a new feature here on the show, we actually have some live chat on Twitch. For those of you listening at home and not watching, so Fuel Snabble, I don't know if you're trolling or if this is a serious question, because I do know you're a troll at sometimes, but you're asking if somebody can explain Mediator. So should we try to break down mediators? It's basically what a messenger pattern. Is that like a pub sub?
It's definitely a pub sub way of coding, and I really haven't dug into it too much. All I know is of the what it's meant for, and it's more of like an event messenger way of sending the message over to get the job done. So
Yeah.
I
So
I don't have too much experience in that. So
yeah, it's
unfortunately,
a .NET library. I would say this might be a long shot, but it's kind of on par with a Flux or Redux pattern, but it's for backend .NET code. So you're talking about like server infrastructure code. So it's like a messenger response type of a thing. So yeah, supports request response commands, queries, notifications, events, synchronous, asynchronous, dispatching.
yeah.
So you're talking about CQRS, I think is what it's called.
Yes.
Command queue response.
Command query.
Command query, yeah. Response something or other. I just failed the whiteboard test.
You and me both.
I got the acronym CQRS pattern.
Command and query responsibility segregation. That's it.
Yeah,
Okay.
what he said.
Well, I'm not gonna get that architect position. Okay. No, I'm kidding.
So it looks like Martin Fowler wrote about this back in 2011. I don't know if he was the one that coined it, or actually says
He's another one who's up
he
here.
credits Greg Young.
He's up here. He's another one.
Yeah. So folks way smarter than me came up with this idea. No, this is really cool though. So the idea is the web in the way like server client models operate is very request response, right? And a lot of these requests and response are written in a way that it's very rigid. You expect the same caller to be accepting the response back, and it creates like this monolithic application architecture. The way that CQRS works, it kind of breaks down the responsibilities a little bit more, where there's a like an MVC pattern, I guess, where something is requesting a query from a database, the database responds, and there's kind of more of a again, it's very like a Flux pattern, but it's more on client server than just on the UI. So that that query results in some activity happening in the UI, and then once that is complete, a command is issued to do something with that data. So you might query the database. There's your query. You process something in the UI. The user maybe deletes an item. A command to delete the item is processed back to the database. But these are in different layers of abstraction rather than all being inside of the same controller. So it separates those commands
it's another
out.
way of just saying these are the read procedures, these are the write procedures.
Yeah.
So the command query is the reading of the database, and then the RS is the actually posting or the whatever writing to the database. Things writing to the database, if I'm understanding that right.
Yeah, and Mediator gives you basically the contracts, the interfaces that make this separation of concerns more obvious and easy to work with. So you've got like iRequest, iNotification, and those type of things. And I've seen people use this in Blazor on the front end in place of something like a Redux pattern. Because of that similarity there. They're kind of in that same boat of functionality. So they they're for very complex, stateful things that you don't want the state to get corrupted. You want to have kind of in the case of Mediator, I believe the state is more your data storage is like your SQL server, in like Redux. The state is, or the storage is more like the actual state of the UI, but they kind of follow similar ideas after that. It's my 2 cents anyway.
That was more like 4 cents. That was really good.
Fuel Snabble says he uses the CQRS pattern at work. So if you're using CQRS and you're doing .NET, you might want to look at Mediator, the way it's spelled, Mediator, because that's literally what it's designed for. And again, that's like one of the Jimmy Bogard, like, why don't we just, everybody's doing this or should be doing this for some reason or another. Why don't we just make a library? All good libraries come from abstractions from existing product, in my opinion, refactorings of things, not the other way around. You're going to write an open source library, and your starting point is, I'm going to write an open source library. Then you're coming at it from the wrong direction.
Right angle, yeah.
Mm-hmm. What makes these things that Jimmy's done, and the few limited successes I've had in comparison, is they've come from refactorings of things that were working well, and it's like, okay, I refactored all this crap out. Now I can apply this to like some other stuff, I'm sure. So let's go ahead and put that in a library.
It's from real life experiences, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just real world writing code. So,
yeah. Can you believe that's been an hour already?
What?
I know you've been.
No.
You're talking about before the show. You're like, I don't know how we're gonna fill an hour. It's been an hour already.
It's been an hour.
Holy has been. So with that said, do you have any? First of all, your website, of course. Feel free to share a link to that. Tell folks about that. Yep. And any other things that you want to kind of promote here.
Not much, but if anybody is looking for to explain something or anything .NET, or send me a link, or every morning every weekday morning try to do morning coffee links at 8:30 just to post something out there, just something that's interesting. I've actually am doing a little side project to create trying to self-publish an ebook. So it's
sounds
I guess let the title out, 31 ways to improve performance of your .NET Core website.
So I've got an ebook as well. It's 32 ways to improve. No, I'm just kidding. I had to go there.
All right, well,
it's like the 6-minute abs. Do you remember that?
Yep.
Something about Mary.
I can do it in 5.
I had to go there. I didn't mean to derail. So you said you're working on it. Is this going to be like an Amazon published thing, or?
Haven't decided yet. I'm working more on some of the content because of, these are going to be little nuggets of things that .NET developers who are having problems with their website trying to get performance out of it. Mm-hmm. They could just take it and just use it immediately. So they'll be like, of course, 31 chapters. But each one will be self-contained. So it'll be its own little improving your ASP.NET website performance little nugget. So
where can we follow you on the Twitters?
Let's see, JD Danylko. I know it's everybody asks me how to spell it, but it's in the Danylko web on the screen. Usually on danylkoweb.com, I have a list of how you can contact me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. I'm on some of the other social. I don't think I'm on Facebook. I decided to jump ship on that one. I think that's it. Twitter and LinkedIn are the best places to contact me.
And so it's Dan YLKO web.com. And then we'll pop that link on the show notes as well. So if you're looking at this on your favorite podcasting app, you can find it there. And of course, make sure you like and subscribe and all those type of things here on Twitch or on SoundCloud, whatever your favorite podcast app is. And JD, thanks again for coming on the show and chatting it up. It's been great to have you.
Ed. This was fun. This was a good time. Thank you for having
Excellent.
me on. I appreciate it.
Anytime, my friend. We'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.